Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Evening Review. My name is Toibon Jabela, your host, and let's have a look at today's front page of Namibian Sun. Tonight, we are welcoming back the leader of the Landless People's Movement, Bernadus Swartbooi, to, of course, discuss with us a lot of things that are currently happening in the country. My man, welcome back to the show, man.
Thank you, Troy. It's good to see you. You have improved vastly after you got married. Compliments to your wife for having done an excellent job under very difficult circumstances.
Thank you very much, our person. I'm sure my wife is watching, so that will be good. Yeah, thanks. So, give me your reaction of your assessment of the just released or even probably leaked report into the ancestral land claims that was just delivered to the president last year. Of course, it was kept under the wraps, but we saw it emerging recently. Have you had a chance to look at it, and what is your assessment?
We have had colleagues looking at it, and we are still studying it. But remember, we have been saying that if you want to consolidate this matter of ancestral land, you've got to go to even a constitutional amendment, so that you recognize certain groups as vulnerable and marginalized, and that you also have to include the land question as part of the property regime within the constitution itself. So our view is that it doesn't go far enough. It makes some proposals that I think are not necessarily proposals that one should reject, but they also argue, I think, from the point of view that there is no more land available, which I don't agree with, because from which analytical lens are you looking at this question of no more land is available? The whole Zambezi is available. The whole two Kavangos are available. Kunene South, west of Korigas, land is available. In the southern parts of the country, you have the land of the Ngqikowa that has the largest communal land in the Republic of Namibia. Land is available for that community to have sufficient resettlement capability, agricultural capability, and so on and so forth. So the point of departure of the Ancestral Land Commission is therefore troublesome. That you start with, there is very little land available. And I think it is very defeatist to approach the land question from a scarcity. While it is not correct to suggest that that is scarce, because in doing that, the Land Commission also basically reaffirms that existing communal land should not be developed to a commercial level. You can develop at a commercial level land in the Zambezi, in the Kavangos, and the government has, at least in the Kavangos, developed at least 2,000 hectare, 2,000 farms. Of course, the roads and access roads and all other feeder roads are a problem that they need to look at, and so on. So, yes, good and well. I think it was a good start for government to consider this matter of ancestral land and to have a commission. I think it gives us an opportunity to improve as society what needs to be done on the matter. And from that basis, I would give thanks to the colleagues that have been working on this. I think there are also other areas, toys that we must look at. In the northern areas in Nomsati region, there are communities that are struggling with land. How do you respond to that question of land there, and how do you reorganize land as a productive asset over and above it being a communal property, a common property for all, for generations to come, to be protected and so on. And how do we then, for instance, develop areas around the Kunene River? How do you deal with it? Then I think the additional questions that one will have to ask is, even around the Orange River, the size of Namibian farms, if we accept that a farm has to be 5,000 or 10,000 hectares, then probably the scarcity of land is a big problem. But if you accept that and say, in certain parts of the country, you may need just 10 hectares and have sufficient equipment and machinery and sufficient funding to go into a higher level agriculture program, business activity, then the language begins to change of scarcity toward actually a great abundance. And I think this is the philosophical departure points that we have a difference with in terms of the whole land debate, for that matter.
Indeed. So briefly on this subject, before we move to the other one, what would you like to see happening then? Oitele and his commissioners have delivered this document. They are saying there is no more land left. Everything that we see every day is actually already claimed by someone. And there was even the issue of, I think you briefly alluded to it, about, I think it's Section 16 of the Constitution or so.
Article.
Article, thank you. Which sort of says that you may not go ahead with the plan that we have, as a matter of fact. So what is it that we must radically do to ensure that the status quo is shaken?
Well, you know, I've been in Zimbabwe for 2 weeks to study the land question. I went to South Africa. Then I enrolled myself for what they call a postgraduate diploma in poverty, land and agrarian reform. And so one has had the opportunity to completely have a mental overhaul of what land asset means and what it can do for society and what it should do for society. The Western world perceives land only as a means of production, that you get sheep and goats and cattle and agronomy, and that you then make yourself rich. For Africa, it's that, and over above that, it's a place for social recuperation, it's a space for social interaction, it's a space for cultural practices. So for the African, it has a broader cultural, sociological, including even a physiological meaning. I was with a friend as I was doing this course in 2018 from Uganda. He is a chief. And one of the things he quite aptly pointed out is that from the African point of view, the land belongs to us, but we also belong to the land. And I think if we understand that principle very well, you would, for instance, have the Waitela report distributed to every traditional authority and every stakeholder and say, fellas, here we have an imperfect report, since all human activities are imperfect. What are those areas? Yes, the Commission is recommending a number of things that must be done, but what are the areas that we think must first be prioritized? That is one. So that people can again look at that report and sharpen whatever the report is offering. The second issue is that, whereas unlike South Africa and Zimbabwe, land is being sold here. I mean, the past drought has had a huge number of commercial farmers who happen to be white compatriots selling off their pieces of land. So as we speak, we have about 900 farms on the market. And that is why it becomes difficult in this country to talk about expropriation while the government has given waivers. In other words, the government has given commercial farmers a right to sell to whosoever they can find on the market. In that context, it does not have to be toxic where you actually have to go and take land. The issue is that you want to sort of re-engage those farmers and say, we have raised enough funds, let's get those farms back. Some will be more productive than others, some will be less productive than others, but nonetheless, let's get it back. And then, thirdly, one of the important things would be, I think, for us as a nation to decide that as we speak about land, you simultaneously have to speak about water. And if you speak about agricultural land, you can't speak without water resources being there. And I mean, there are countries like, I think, Saudi Arabia that offered to help us with a desalination plant. The southern part of the country has massive water bodies. You look at the northern belt, where you colleagues come from, the underground water in Ohangwena and so on. These are areas that we can extract water resources and distribute it as fast as possible. Make that huge investment so that our agricultural potential as a country can literally overnight get to a point of high level productivity. The third thing I think that we should be doing is, how do we deal with areas such as the Kavango and Zambezi that is fertile land, good water bodies? How do we make those areas productive? And I think this is where we are speaking about not only communal production, subsistence production therein, about commercial private land that could be developed, but also about large-scale irrigated agriculture. And these are the combinations of things that we can look and do to ensure that the land hunger is addressed. I think when you do this part well, in terms of, for instance, developing in areas like Osati and Ohangwena, great opportunities for people beyond Mahango. Likewise also in the Kavangos, and in some other riverine areas. You are likely also to address another question that actually appears to be fairly secondary because of the nature of how people migrate to, for instance, the cities. That you are now able to create pull factors outside of Windhoek for people to retreat back to where originally they come from and be engaged in productive activities where they can feed themselves, where they can house themselves, and where they can actually be productive. So the one solution could lead to another solution. But I think what is difficult is a culture of what you have set up the state to look like, to do, and the budgeting process, what it means to budget. You know, if today I'm made president, there are a couple of ministries I'm going to get rid of. And the budget line I'm going to look at is to balloon agriculture like nobody has ever seen before. Precisely because you have water that you have to resolve. And therefore the land question. And balloon agriculture in a way that many of our young people can actually enter the agro-food processing business itself. Maybe sometimes our young people see farming as a remote, boring business, or maybe not even a business, more a cultural practice. Whereas it's actually a business. Some of us have made a good living from farming when we were 5. I was a strong cattle farmer, and I lived, not survived, lived from my cattle for 4 or 5 years straight as an income. And so I think we have to reorientate our young people to get back. But you don't just reorientate without making the investment in the actual physical spaces where you want people to start their own business. And I am convinced that we can feed Africa, we can feed the rest of the world, we can feed the Asian economies that are rising, but we have yet to discover that we are probably agricultural powerhouses on the continent. We have the best soil on earth. Africa. We have the largest non-private lands available. And so therefore the question of resolving the land issue is not just to privatize the land issue. It doesn't have to be. You can set up stronger systems within the available communal land that allows Twes and Swartbooi to be productive farmers with certain principles agreed, both with traditional authorities and with communities and so on. So when I speak of agriculture, I'm actually excited about what it offers us and what it offers the future generations, because the economy that we know it today has been ravaged by COVID, but you recognize beyond COVID that how do you feed yourself as society? If the Zimbabweans were not strong in agriculture, the urban Zimbabwean landscape would have disappeared. I, as I said, spent 2-3 weeks in Zimbabwe to understand how people in Harare that do not have plantations were able to survive. And the families were saying, when the shops became empty, we were supplying the maize, the sorghum, and all of these things to our relatives in the urban areas. And that type of strength is important. But again, you and I, Twes, would go to Oshakati for a weekend and attend a friend's wedding. You and I will eat the meat there. We will not get sick. We will braai and enjoy it, and we'll even want to eat more of that meat. Sunday, you and I will have to get rid of that meat if there is a leftover, because you and I can't bring that meat over to the side. These are the structural problems that we'll also have to look at, but in a responsible fashion. And to do so, we've got to look at partnership with other countries. What are we saying is our relationship with Angola? Can we do something sustainable to mitigate what would have been the problems of the red line? How do we deal with countries like Zimbabwe and others to assist us with a number of other things? But we are not focused on agriculture as we should be. I think our drive toward modernization and job creation has to do with buildings with chimneys where smoke comes out, and that's not the way to go.
That's not the way to go.
I can talk the whole day about agriculture.
I know.
I give up for now.
Yeah. On land, Mr. Swartbooi, let's talk about quickly before we have two more subjects. One is the City of Windhoek. You have representation there.
That's right.
There is a coalition. I don't think you're part of it.
No.
What were your fundamental differences within the space of coalition that you opted out?
First, thank you very much for asking that question, because I think sometimes some Namibians jump to conclusions without understanding how some political parties function. And one of the ways in which at least LPM is functioning, no criticism to any other political party, is that we've got to understand each other from an ideological space. What do you stand for? I see people are calling themselves progressive forces, but progressive essentially denotes a leftist historic background. And some parties that claim to be in a coalition, which itself is a misnomer, because to be in a coalition you must have signed some sort of agreement. That they constitute apparently themselves as a progressive force. That I think is an abnormality. But for us, there are a number of principal issues. First, the ideological question. What are we doing in terms of our ideological posture? And we're saying, even if we don't necessarily agree on that, we needed to understand who comes from where. Because we can be reading from your documents, but who are you really? You appreciate the leftist school, or you appreciate Adam Smith or David Ricardo, but how do you relate to practical issues? We needed to understand that. That didn't come because there was a rush toward people assigning each other positions. The second issue is, what is the program that the coalition must go and work on when you are together in the council? Because we come from different orientations, but something must keep us together. So we're saying the land question of the Tomani, these people have in the 50s and the 40s and the 60s been taken from Windhoek, dumped in Sores and other places in the western side of the country, in Erongo and Kunene. Many of these people, actually, the descendants, want to return. You would one day be, if you're able to be doing justice to yourself, to go and see that the graves of the people that have left from by train and by trucks and so on, they were forcefully removed by the apartheid regime from Windhoek, the Tomani, have had their graves made there, and most of the people that died in the 60s and the 70s. We are told by the elders in folklore that it's because of the pain and the humiliation and all of the sadness that people died in huge numbers of that community. Until the date, they want to return to their homes. They know what it means to be from Boomgaardsbron, which is a different Damara name, and to say, but look, is there not a little space? We are not 100,000 people. We are probably 700, 800, 1,000, 1,200 people, or a little bit more. We couldn't get through to that. There are issues of land audits and financial audits. There were issues from us that you have to reshape the budget of the city so that what is a priority for us collectively becomes the priority reflected in the budget. I mean, the city now has a half $500 million indebtedness. But it's a city that will essentially never, I don't want to say never, but would not go bankrupt. I mean, its income exceeds 580 million per year. And we were saying that there've got to be principles we agree on, so that, for instance, we say land for and housing development for Sewendaland and Achterland and for those of our communities that are downtrodden in the western side of the city, we've got to have at least a minimum of 100 million. Of course, we did not agree on a number, but we were saying, for instance, that was our internal proposal, that, look, we've got to dedicate resources. And our thinking was at least 100 million per year for land servicing. And low-cost housing. We didn't get that. There was this whole aura of who is to be mayor, who is to be deputy mayor, who is to be chairperson of management. And when we recognized that our discussion is probably ripe, but we are late on the scene, we then said, by the way, if you are throwing all of this thing away, we also have a candidate for mayor.
Yeah.
We said that.
Yeah.
And then some of the colleagues said, well, you must talk to Job about it.
Yeah.
And then you must also explain yourself. And some of our colleagues, because our delegation was led by the operative secretary, our delegation said, well, if we have to explain why we want to be mayor, then anyone else that wants to be mayor must also explain to all of us so that we can get to a vote. And I asked my colleagues, I said, give me feedback, and they called me from the media. I said, then let's pull out, because what keeps any coalition together, just like any marriage, just like any political party, are certain fundamental principles that are sacred to that union. If problems in the relationship of personalities become difficult, it would be those principles that would get back to you and say, or that you would get back to everyone and say, guys, yes, we have these difficulties, but the battles we have are more important. As it is now, you do not know what the primary agenda of the city is. We've also said, of course, we're also not going to be in management, because there was also an arrogance, I think, from some of the colleagues that thought that, they have the numbers and so on. The other issue, I must say, that we were not also very happy about is the manner in which IPC itself treated LPM. What was the issue? In Swakopmund, we are working with IPC. In Wolfish Bay, we are working with IPC. In Oranjemund, we are working with IPC. Luderitz, Aranos, Karasburg, we have been working with them. We agreed. They have, of course, also been very progressive in saying that, look, guys, you have one seat in Luderitz, take the mayoral position. And I thought it was for me good faith from the IPC in relation to those other areas. In other areas, they even wanted us to be in management, like in Swakopmund. We said, no, it's okay. Get your colleagues in, it's fine, no problem. As well as in Wolfish Bay. So we had thought that, given that there are other spaces that we have established seemingly a significantly fluent relationship, that it shouldn't be different in Windhoek. What was different for us in Windhoek was, here we wanted, over and above the other areas that we work together, we wanted very specific consensus to be reached, so that consensus will replicate to all other areas. Clearly, it seems that was not priority for them. But as I'm saying, we are working together. We're in coalitions, so we have to be sensitive as to what we say to each other. Maybe not coalition, but voting agreements. Verbal voting agreements. As is the case in Luderitz, as is the case in Oranjemund. So I don't think it would be correct to say we are in a coalition. I don't see any coalition agreement. I see agreements to, guys, let's vote together, which is fine. It's a good start. But I think our view is that we will go back to IBC and say, fellas, let's re-engage, because there are instances that IBC really has tried to warm up to us, and it's not wrong. I think we recognize that we face great challenges. These challenges we must meet head on, and it's not about egos. And for us, in the city of Windhoek, question, it was never about egos. You can now see that once the mayor and management and other people were sworn in, there was a discussion of lights for Christmas. That became an important issue. There is now a discussion that they have now announced a pre-allocation decision, which I would have advised against announcing pre-allocation, because you create more questions. Where are you going to start? Which areas? Because I know one political institution has a list itself already that it wants to steamroll in the pre-allocation. Are you not going to upset fragile relations? I would have said, don't announce that you are going to be servicing land, service the land while you are working out sensitively criteria in a sensible way, and that you are looking analytically at what are the interests that you are going to balance.
Yeah.
What is the geographic makeup of the people that you have? It's important because Windhoek is everybody here.
Yes.
Because you can't over-allocate to Y and under-allocate to X, because then X would say, well, did you mean this 3,000 was only for this group and not for that group?
Yeah.
So you've got to be sensitive. I think the other issue also was the general agenda starting from day one as to the pecking order of setting timeframes. What are you going to be doing? What is the expectation that you want to have reached this time and that time and so on? The other point we've also had is that we wanted to open...
the last one on the subject before we go to
I know, Twist. I know you're going to edit it.
Yeah.
We wanted as LPM, still want to develop a thriving city in the western side of Windhoek. This side has everything. If people want a house, they buy a house. If people want to go to a shop or a hospital, they have it all here. Our people cannot have that apartheid system spatial development continuing.
Yeah.
So we were saying we've got to pivot significant resources toward the western side, the Havanas and the Hakahanas and the Kilimanjaros, so that we are able to therefore develop a thriving city also on that side.
Yes.
And these were some of the issues that I think we couldn't agree on. But I would like people to give space to the current council. I think it is necessary that people are not at each other's throats, that we give each other space and see how far we take this thing. I think they are also young, starting with the mayor himself. Very respectful toward me. He's my younger brother. And I think let's give them space and also the necessary support.
Yeah.
But again, the challenge that you have is the irresponsibility of some of the young ones, that whatever the council does, they privatize it as if it's an activity of a particular institution. And that is spoiling relationships. When you say as LPM, you've got to deal with the question of land, they go and take it at a personal level and they say, no. We are also in that council. And we are also putting pressure on our councillors to say, go and work on the question of land. There will be disagreements from time to time, but the issue is keep the focus and keep your eyes on the ball.
Indeed. Briefly, Honorable, in Namibia, liquidation. Big topic this week, the demonstrations by the unions and disagreements within even the ruling party itself. But cabinet seems to be clear on going ahead with the liquidation. What is the position of LPM and yourself on the subject?
We articulated it a little bit yesterday at our press event and in Parliament. And we were also fairly balanced in suggesting that, look, there has always been pressure on Swartbooi to liquidate Namibia. But again, as I said, it's always important that you have to understand the level of analysis that any person is applying in arriving at a decision. And I was arguing, and I'm canvassing that argument hitherto, that if you look at Namibia from the point of view of Treasury having given money for all these years and therefore we are tired, well, say so. But you've also a responsibility to look at the economy as a whole and see what is it that Namibia has positively impacted. Even if on its own it has good governance problems, it has barriers of balancing its books, it has problems of auditing, it has problems of equipment and all of these things, which we do not deny and which has to be looked at. But if you look at Namibia and its contribution to the economy as a whole, has it been a wholly positive trajectory or has it been wholly negative? So that when you arrive at a decision, you say you are not only just solving one problem, but you are solving a multiple number of problems in the economy as a whole, so that your decision to liquidate Namibia is guaranteed to help to restructure the economy in all other sectors. This is not the case as far as we are concerned. And we have said, if Cabinet's judgment regarding the success or the failure of an entity depends on how many millions it has given, and that's the only yardstick, then we can then also go and look at other entities that they have given money.
Yeah.
NWR. You look at NamWater. NamWater does not often get involved in building infrastructure. Government builds infrastructure, hands over to NamWater. They make the monies from that. Even Negerdal Dam. Yeah. It was built not from NamWater resources, but from Treasury. Then handed over to NamWater to manage. They will now be the bosses of it. You look at farmers from, I was saying, and from Okonyatu, where there was a solution provided that water would be piped from Grootfontein, from Combat, a good solution, but the pipe water is super expensive for the farmers, such that it has made them bankrupt. Yeah. So we would have thought that in respect of Air Namibia, first, that they would have reflected broadly and recognized their own consultants that they have hired, who recommended that liquidation is the last exercise. And I think that consultant was hired in 2007 and 2018. But they have ignored it. And they are now going to the very last point on the agenda, liquidate. I have had the privilege to also see some documents just before I came to the show, where they have plans to sell off some areas of NWR to Gondwana. Yeah. And Shimi, I know, is a shareholder in Gondwana, has been for a long time. From the position of an ordinary person reading that the Minister of Finance is a shareholder of Gondwana, and there is a plan to sell off some areas, I think Hardap Lodge and some other resorts and so on. What are we supposed to logically conclude? It becomes suspicious. You have Transnet, that has been a mess. Transnet needs 11.57 billion for infrastructure to be improved. Once you have improved that infrastructure, you would need an additional 200 million to buy additional equipment for that company to function well. It couldn't carry on further with the manganese that they are bringing in from South Africa. Trucks took over. Now, what are we saying in terms of companies like that, where you are likely not to have the 11.5 billion, but you have, as a country, located your economic development space as one of being a logistics hub? So what does it tell you? If you are correct and consistent in terms of your policy and economic development trajectory, that you've got to locate yourself as a logistics hub, you need to have strong investment in seaports, in air, in rail, in road. Now you are closing the air. Are you consistent with a stated objective that you want to be a logistics hub in the continent, in the Southern African region? And so this juggling around of concepts and decisions without a fundamental analysis that addresses structural issues within the economy is a problem. And it becomes a political problem, but worse, it becomes an economic crisis. Transnet can never function. But what is it that they are not liquidating then, Transnet? Air Namibia is contributing massively to the economy as a whole. Why is Air Namibia being targeted? Why could you not look at the examples that Air Seychelles has? They had problems, but they sold, I think, 50 to 60% to Etihad and got back to profitability. There is also debt swaps that you can do to say, this airline, please come, pay this debt and become a shareholder. Whichever airlines, Ethiopia, we have 6 billion of debt of Air Namibia, hypothetically now speaking. Why don't you pay 6 billion, but you also get maybe 70% and so. So it was an irresponsible decision. It is a decision, again, unfortunately, I must say it, where the stomach of the thief drives the interest that the thief must pursue. The elite have decided that they have been caught pens down with fish rod. They are pivoting to state-owned enterprises. Air Namibia is a lucrative one where they are already ready and well positioned to replace it. They will now, after they have gone from one entity to the other, if they succeed with this one, finish the privatization of state-owned enterprises, then they will introduce the NEF bill with heightened speed. so that they can now go to the bank accounts of white Namibians. This is how the pecking order of things is done. And it's going to be a rough ride. I must say that although I see that they are going to do all of these things, I find it difficult to reconcile the fact that these guys would likely survive to 2024.
Yeah.
Something in my spirit tells me that these fellows would be out by 2022. First, because they are highly factionalized. If Leon is afraid to go and attend a meeting because of security issues, you must see there's a problem. But there is no unifying factor. Yeah. You could see that the current person, who is the Vice President, Netumbo, could not even rise to the occasion yesterday to take leadership. And you can go to Sarah, you can go to Sophia Shaningwa, you can go to Nangolo Mbumba, you can go to all of the other generations downward, including to my own generation of the Nekundis and others. There is just no line of leadership that can take over this country, this party, and I dare say that I'm really the person that can do that challenge, because I am convinced that we have the capacity, we have the heart of the people of this country in the right space, and we are in complete solidarity with the workers, so that there are opportunities that can be exploited in a crisis, and there is real leadership to be given in a time like this. And as I said yesterday in Parliament, what is difficult for a minister to come and make a ministerial statement and the president then to address the nation on this matter? The question is the president around? Is he around? This is the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
That's Bernadus Swartbooi. He is the leader of the Landless People's Movement, giving us his brilliant thoughts, as always, on national issues. Thank you for watching.